In the sprawling multi-trillion-dollar war for technological supremacy, there are skirmishes, and there are turning points. This is a turning point. In a move that sent shockwaves from the data centers of Shanghai to the boardrooms of Silicon Valley, China's internet regulator has quietly, but forcefully, told its biggest technology companies to stop buying AI chips from Nvidia. This isn't just another trade spat. This is a deliberate, calculated act of self-amputation, a move that on the surface seems to defy all commercial logic. Why would China willingly cut itself off from the world's undisputed leader in artificial intelligence hardware, the very company that powers the AI revolution? The answer isn't simply about retaliation. It's about revolution. This directive is a declaration of technological independence, a stunning vote of confidence in a homegrown champion, and a high-stakes gamble that could permanently fracture the global technology landscape. Beijing has drawn a line in the silicon, and the world is about to find out what happens when the dragon decides to go it alone. The order did not arrive via a public press conference or a formal government decree. Instead, it was delivered through a characteristically opaque but powerful channel known as window guidance. The Cyberspace Administration of China, CAC, the country's potent internet regulator, informed a roster of tech behemoths, including Alibaba, Tencent, and TikTok owner ByteDance, that their procurement of Nvidia hardware had to stop. The directive was surgically precise. It explicitly instructed these companies to terminate all testing and cancel any existing orders for Nvidia's RTX Pro 6000D server chip. This wasn't just any chip. It was a product Nvidia had introduced only 2 months prior, specifically tailored to navigate the labyrinth of US export controls and serve the Chinese market. The ban also extended beyond this new product, representing a significant escalation from earlier guidance that had focused on curbing the use of the H20, another of Nvidia's sanctions-compliant chips. These were the very processors that Nvidia had painstakingly re-engineered, walking a tightrope between Washington's national security demands and Beijing's insatiable appetite for AI compute. For the Chinese tech firms on the receiving end, the message was unambiguous. One executive, speaking to the Financial Times, described it as loud and clear. The era of relying on American-designed, even if deliberately weakened, AI hardware was over. The industry was now expected to commit fully to building and buying domestic. To understand the gravity of Beijing's decision, one must first understand the years of escalating pressure that preceded it. This moment did not happen in a vacuum. It is the culmination of a long and bitter technological Cold War, one in which the United States has increasingly sought to weaponize its dominance in semiconductor technology. Beginning in earnest around October 2022, the Biden administration implemented a sweeping set of export controls designed to create strategic choke points in China's technological development. The goal was not to cripple China's economy wholesale, but to surgically sever its access to the two things most critical for competing at the AI frontier: the most advanced AI chips themselves, and the sophisticated semiconductor manufacturing equipment required to build them. At the heart of this strategy was a recognition of the unique role that high-performance graphics processing units, a market dominated by Nvidia, play in modern artificial intelligence. The immense parallel processing capabilities of these chips are essential for training the large language models and other foundational models that are the bedrock of today's AI. Washington correctly identified that without access to this hardware, China's ambitions of becoming a global AI leader by 2030 would be severely constrained. This choke point strategy placed Nvidia in an extraordinarily precarious position. The company found itself caught between the geopolitical ambitions of Washington and the commercial reality of its reliance on Beijing. In 2022, before the harshest restrictions took effect, the Greater China region accounted for a staggering 26% of Nvidia's total revenue. It was a market simply too large to abandon. In response to the initial October 2022 ban on its top-tier A100 and H100 AI chips, Nvidia scrambled to create compliant alternatives. The result was the A800 and H800, chips that were essentially detuned versions of their more powerful siblings, designed to fall just below the performance thresholds set by the US Commerce Department. Imagine a world-class Formula One race car being forced to install a smaller, less powerful engine to be allowed on certain tracks. It's still a fantastic car, capable of incredible speeds, but it's not going to win the Grand Prix against unrestricted competitors. This was the compromise Nvidia offered its Chinese customers. But the tightrope kept getting thinner. In October 2023, Washington tightened the screws again, expanding the export controls to ban even the A800 and H800. Once more, Nvidia went back to the drawing board, engineering an even more carefully calibrated set of products, the H20 and the RTX Pro 6000D. These chips were designed to thread an even finer needle, offering just enough performance to be useful for AI workloads without triggering the new, stricter US regulations. This history is crucial. It demonstrates Nvidia's unwavering commitment to serving its Chinese clients, moving mountains to design custom silicon just for them. It is precisely this context that makes China's ultimate rejection of these bespoke chips so shocking and so significant. Beijing didn't just ban a standard American product, it banned the very product designed to be the solution. This brings us to the central question: why now? Why would Beijing make such a drastic move, effectively forcing its tech champions into a period of technological uncertainty? A move of this magnitude would be suicidal if China didn't believe it had a viable domestic alternative ready to step into the void. This directive, therefore, is not primarily an act of retaliation against the United States. It is a massive, state-sanctioned vote of confidence in China's own national champion, Huawei. After years of being battered by US sanctions, Beijing has clearly decided that Huawei's Ascend line of AI accelerators is finally good enough to begin the purge. An objective, data-driven analysis of Huawei's hardware reveals a nuanced and compelling picture. The workhorse of its AI efforts is the Ascend 910B, a 7-nanometer chip produced by China's top foundry, SMIC, with its successor, the 910C, ramping up production. When placed side by side with Nvidia's export-compliant H20, the trade-offs become clear. The H20, leveraging Nvidia's more advanced architecture and memory technology, boasts significantly higher memory bandwidth, a critical metric for feeding data to the processor during the training of large language models. However, on paper, the Ascend 910B offers greater total processing performance, TPP, a metric developed by the US government itself to measure a chip's raw computational power. The most telling benchmark, however, is not against the weakened H20, but against Nvidia's pre-sanctioned A100, the former gold standard for AI training. Multiple reports and statements from Huawei indicate that the Ascend 910B can achieve approximately 80% of the A100's efficiency in certain LLM training tasks. This is a pivotal data point. It signals that China's domestic technology is rapidly approaching the performance level that the global market had just a few years ago. From Beijing's perspective, if your homegrown chip can get you 80% of the way to the unrestricted global standard, why would you continue to buy a foreign, politically unreliable, and deliberately downgraded product that offers marginal, if any, real-world benefits? The calculus had fundamentally shifted. To put the hardware at the center of this story into context, a direct comparison is necessary. As the table illustrates, while the Ascend 910B lags in memory bandwidth and interconnect speed, a crucial factor for linking thousands of chips together to train massive models, its raw compute performance, FP16 teraflops, is competitive with, and in some cases exceeds, that of the H20. For many AI tasks, this makes it a good enough alternative. But the battle for AI supremacy is not fought with silicon alone. The real war, and the steepest mountain for Huawei to climb, is in software. Nvidia's true dominance lies not just in its hardware, but in its proprietary software platform, CUDA. For over 2 decades, CUDA, Compute Unified Device Architecture, has been the operating system for AI. It is a parallel computing platform and programming model that allows developers to unlock the massive power of Nvidia's GPUs for general-purpose computing. It is deeply integrated into every major AI framework, from Google's TensorFlow to Meta's PyTorch, and is supported by a vast, mature ecosystem of libraries, tools, and a global community of developers. This is Nvidia's secret sauce, its impenetrable moat, and a monumental barrier to entry for any would-be competitor. In stark contrast stands Huawei's software equivalent, CAN, Compute Architecture for Neural Networks. The reality of developing on CAN, according to numerous reports from industry insiders and engineers in China, is grim. It has been described as bug-ridden, difficult and unstable to use, and plagued by poor documentation. Engineers report frequent, random crashes that are difficult to debug, particularly during the complex and lengthy process of training large-scale AI models. These are not minor inconveniences. They are fundamental stability issues that can derail multi-million-dollar development projects. This disparity in software maturity created a powerful market inertia. For a company like ByteDance or Alibaba, where speed to market and developer efficiency are paramount, the commercial logic was clear. Why would they voluntarily abandon the stable, reliable, and universally understood CUDA platform for a domestic alternative that was notoriously difficult and unstable, even if the hardware was comparable or even free? The short-term costs in lost engineering hours, delayed projects, and competitive disadvantage would be immense. This reveals the deeper strategic logic behind Beijing's directive. Market forces alone would never be enough to break CUDA's stranglehold. The commercial incentives for China's tech giants were too strongly aligned with the status quo. Therefore, the state had to intervene. The ban on Nvidia chips is a brute force solution to this market problem. It is a top-down mandate designed to override commercial logic, forcing the entire Chinese tech industry to endure the short-term pain of migrating to and maturing the CAN ecosystem for the long-term strategic goal of complete technological self-sufficiency. The directive does more than just push Chinese companies away from Nvidia. It funnels them directly into the arms of Huawei. This move represents one of the most extreme forms of industrial protectionism seen in the modern era. In a single stroke, Beijing has carved out the world's second-largest market for artificial intelligence and gifted it, almost exclusively, to a single national champion. The scale of this captive market is immense. China's AI market was valued at over $29 billion in 2023 and is projected to explode to more than $150 billion by 2032, with a compound annual growth rate of over 20%. By forcing its largest and most advanced companies to procure domestic hardware, the Chinese government is creating a guaranteed, multi-billion-dollar customer base for Huawei's Ascend chips. This captive market serves a powerful economic purpose. Before this ban, Chinese tech giants were placing massive orders with Nvidia. In 2023 alone, companies like Alibaba, Tencent, and Baidu collectively ordered an estimated $5 billion worth of Nvidia chips, stockpiling them in anticipation of even tighter US sanctions. Now, that entire massive revenue stream, and all future streams like it, will be redirected from Santa Clara to Shenzhen. This state-mandated demand functions as a colossal, government-directed research and development fund for Huawei. This strategic reallocation of capital is designed to solve Huawei's biggest problem: money. US sanctions have effectively cut Huawei off from many of its most lucrative global markets, starving it of the revenue needed to fund the astronomically expensive R&D required to compete with a global behemoth like Nvidia. Chip design is one of the most capital-intensive industries on Earth, and closing the gap on a market leader requires sustained, multi-billion-dollar annual investments. Beijing's directive provides this capital. It is forcing its most profitable and successful private enterprises to bankroll the development of a national strategic asset. This guaranteed revenue will allow Huawei to hire the world's best engineers, pour resources into fixing its troubled CAN software platform, and fund the costly, iterative process of improving chip manufacturing yields. In essence, China's domestic market is being weaponized to subsidize Huawei's path to global competitiveness. Despite the bold strategy, Beijing's gambit is fraught with peril. A forced march toward technological independence is not without its landmines, and China's path is littered with significant, potentially debilitating obstacles. The most immediate and formidable challenge lies in the physical manufacturing of the chips themselves. While Huawei's designs are impressive, its ability to produce them at scale is severely constrained by its reliance on a domestic manufacturing ecosystem that remains years behind the global cutting edge. The core of the problem is lithography. China's top foundry, SMIC, does not have access to the most advanced extreme ultraviolet EUV lithography machines, which are produced exclusively by the Dutch firm ASML and are essential for manufacturing chips at 5 nanometers and below. US pressure has ensured that ASML does not sell these machines to China. As a result, SMIC is forced to use older deep ultraviolet DUV lithography tools. To produce 7-nanometer chips like the Ascend 910B, it must employ a complex and inefficient technique known as multi-patterning. This process requires more manufacturing steps, consumes more time and materials, and is far more prone to errors. This leads directly to the second major hurdle: abysmal yield rates. The yield, the percentage of functional, non-defective chips per silicon wafer, for SMIC's 7-nanometer process is estimated to be less than 1/3 of what a cutting-edge foundry like TSMC achieves. This inefficiency drives up production costs by as much as 40 to 50%, severely limiting SMIC's ability to produce advanced chips at the scale required by China's massive tech industry. Finally, there is the high bandwidth memory HBM choke point. HBM is a specialized type of memory stacked vertically on the chip package, essential for providing the massive bandwidth required by AI accelerators. The market is dominated by South Korea's SK Hynix and Samsung. China's domestic HBM production is still in its infancy and cannot meet the demand, making it a critical foreign dependency and arguably the single greatest bottleneck to Huawei's immediate plans to scale up production. The second major risk comes not from the supply side, but from the demand side. The narrative of a unified Chinese tech industry eagerly embracing domestic alternatives is complicated by the actions of the companies themselves. Their behavior, both before and after the directive, suggests a deep-seated reluctance and a clear preference for Nvidia's mature ecosystem. Even before the outright ban, demand for Nvidia's compliant chips like the RTX 6000D was described as lukewarm. The real demand, it seems, was for full-power Nvidia GPUs, which were being acquired through grey market channels and smuggling operations. This indicates that for companies focused on performance, even a weakened Nvidia chip was not a compelling proposition compared to the real thing. The massive stockpiling of Nvidia chips in 2023 is the most telling evidence. The decision to spend billions of dollars on A800 and H800 chips was a clear hedge against future restrictions and a vote of no confidence in the readiness of domestic alternatives. Furthermore, reports have emerged that even after the release of the H20, Chinese regulators were summoning tech firms to justify their procurement decisions, actively pressuring them to explain why they were choosing foreign products over homegrown ones. This suggests the transition was not happening organically; it had to be forced. This forced march creates a national-level innovator's dilemma for China. The country's AI application layer, powered by companies like DeepSeek, has proven to be globally competitive, achieving state-of-the-art results in developing large language models. This success, however, was built on the foundation of the best available hardware, which was overwhelmingly Nvidia's. By forcing these world-class AI research labs onto a less mature, less stable technology stack, Beijing risks hobbling its own champions in the global AI race. The engineering overhead required to deal with the bugs, instability, and poor documentation of the CAN platform will inevitably introduce friction and slow down research and development cycles. The risk for China is that while it focuses on rebuilding the foundations of its technological house, its Western competitors, unburdened and using superior tools, will be racing ahead, building skyscrapers. China might win the battle for silicon independence, only to discover it has fallen perilously behind in the war for AI dominance. The immediate and most obvious casualty of China's directive is Nvidia. The financial impact was instantaneous, with the company's stock price falling sharply in the days following the news. The long-term damage, however, is far more significant. This ban effectively slams the door on what was once a cornerstone of Nvidia's business. The company had already taken a $5.5 billion charge for inventory write-offs due to previous sanctions and has acknowledged up to $15 billion in lost sales. This new directive eliminates one of the few remaining channels for substantial revenue from Chinese customers, closing off a market that once represented more than a quarter of its sales. For Nvidia, the China growth story is, for the foreseeable future, over. Zooming out, this event is the most powerful catalyst yet for the great decoupling. the fracturing of the global technology landscape into two distinct and likely incompatible spheres of influence. The world is now firmly on a path toward two separate technology ecosystems. The first will be a US-led sphere, built on the open, globalized standards dominated by companies like Nvidia and its CUDA platform. The second will be a China-led sphere, a more closed ecosystem built on national champions like Huawei and its CAN platform, driven by the strategic imperatives of the Chinese state. The long-term consequences of this bifurcation will be profound. It will lead to fragmented supply chains, as nations and companies are forced to choose sides. It will result in duplicated research and development efforts, potentially slowing the overall pace of global innovation. And it marks the definitive end of the post-Cold War era of globalized universal technology standards, ushering in a new age of geopolitical and technological competition.